People often use the terms global hub and global city interchangeably, but there's a key difference. Dozens of cities qualify as global hubs. They usually have major urban centers with large populations, globally connected airports, often with a flagship airline, and are magnets for investment and tourism. Achieving this is no small feat in a competitive world. However, only 2 or 3 of these global hubs truly stand out as global cities, because a global city is more than a hub. Global cities are on a different level. They're akin to global capitals. They go beyond being a leading business and finance center. They are at the core of the global economy. They host the world's largest corporations, biggest banks and stock exchanges. They're centers of innovation, attracting talent, investments, and startups. They possess deep expertise and a robust legal framework that ensures the rule of law and predictability. On top of all this, they boast a vibrant art scene, along with world-class museums, festivals, and conventions. The term global city was popularized by sociologist Saskia Sassen in her book The Global City, published during the early days of the globalization era in 1991. Her central argument was that global cities are post-industrial. They're no longer production hubs, but are command centers, because these cities no longer have factories, but instead top-level headquarters, financial institutions, and consultancies. A global city is where decisions are made. Only 3 cities met her criteria: New York City, London, and Tokyo. But the world has changed significantly since 1991. Decades after Sassen's book, we must ask whether other cities have caught up. Various indices now rank cities based on different criteria. Among these, the GAWC, Globalization and World Cities Index, focuses primarily on economic globalization, ranking cities by their significance as keynotes in the global networks of advanced services. According to this index, we see only 2 cities standing out as global: London and New York. Tokyo doesn't appear in this top category. This top category in the index is called Alpha++. Right under it, we have 8 cities listed in the Alpha Plus category. Here we see Tokyo and Paris, which have long been regarded as holding the 3rd and 4th places, respectively. Although these considerations vary, especially in a rapidly changing world. Nonetheless, Tokyo is renowned as a tech giant and industrial powerhouse, while Paris boasts both cultural prestige and a strong business presence. Also in this category are Singapore and Hong Kong, 2 Asian tigers, smaller in population but strategically located. Each has a formidable financial sector backed by well-developed legal frameworks. Then come China's 2 rapidly emerging cities, Shanghai and Beijing. Shanghai excels in business and finance, attracting significant foreign investment, whereas Beijing has policy influence and robust R&D capabilities. Both cities receive substantial support from the Chinese government and will likely continue to rise in the rankings. Sydney and Dubai are closer to the bottom of this category, so they're perhaps better examples of the difference between a global city and a global hub. These 2 cities have impressive urban centers but lack the iconic status of London or New York. They don't host the largest corporations or financial institutions. Relatedly, their stock market capitalizations are significantly lower. Nasdaq alone has about 10 times the market capitalization of exchanges in Dubai and Sydney combined. Nonetheless, Sydney remains a strong financial base with leading universities and a robust legal system rooted in British law. Dubai falls even further behind Sydney in these key respects. However, Dubai's geographical advantage is still significant. Unlike the relatively isolated Sydney, Dubai is strategically located at the crossroads of Europe, Asia, and Africa. providing quicker access to multiple markets. It has also grown as a hub with larger airports, competing with other hubs like Istanbul and Doha in the region. Dubai's dynamic hub environment, cutting-edge logistics driven by government-led initiatives, free zones, and tax incentives, makes it a more attractive destination than Sydney for a broad range of global actors. We need to be aware of these nuances when approaching these rankings. To make sure we get these basics right, I'll offer further examples from cities around the world while making references to their relative significance as nodes in the global economy. That's exactly what this index is gauging anyway. How do these cities enable corporate globalization? Which cities do economic power and influence concentrate in? What is the nature and extent of a city's integration in global business networks? What is their function in that context? And very important, how do these cities in the global north and south qualitatively differ in their integration in global networks, even when they are located next to each other in the same index tier? That's critical and we'll get to that. But let's start the review from the top. The Alpha++ is the only global city level, and there are only two cities there, London and New York. They are unparalleled in most respects and have been in a different league as global cities since at least the 1920s. Then come the 8 cities on the Alpha+ level. They're not global cities in the full sense of the term. They don't check all boxes. They're notably behind, at least in some ways, but they are in the top 10 nonetheless, and that's out of thousands of cities on the planet. Then there are 17 other cities in the Alpha category. These cities tend to be principal gateways for their surrounding regions, and they have strong international reach, considerable regional influence, and are closely interconnected both with each other and with the leading command centers above them. However, they don't possess the ultimate decision-making power. While they serve as effective conduits between local markets and the global system, they don't dictate or set the global agenda as comprehensively as the top global cities do. And below the Alpha category are 22 Alpha- cities, which are also important, but they're usually smaller nodes, less diversified, and more sector-focused. Brussels, for example, is the city of EU policymaking and lobbying, but not otherwise diversified. Similarly, San Francisco is the epicenter of tech innovation in the world, home of many US giants, even above London and New York in that particular regard, as Apple, Google, Meta, Intel, Cisco, and many others operate out of their campuses in Silicon Valley. If we were talking about tech hubs, San Francisco would certainly be ranked number 1 as of 2025, but we're not. This is a different ranking. This ranking is about the nodes of the global economy and how robustly a city plugs into multiple advanced service networks across finance, consulting, advertising, and other sectors. That's why San Francisco ranks below Dubai, because Dubai offers an unparalleled gateway platform for a large region and a stronger, more full-spectrum connectivity with multifaceted services. Now, neither Dubai nor any of the other Alpha+ cities is London or New York, but regardless, they now matter more in these respects than many legacy brand cities, because this is not about being a fancy city or a favorite vacation destination. This is about, again, integration in global networks. To contextualize all this better, I'll illustrate this network with reference to hubs. There are 49 cities in the Alpha category, 2 of them fully global cities. I'll call the remaining 47 cities global hubs, with varying degrees of significance and diversified global links. And then I'll explain why these global hubs matter in the broader context. Because Alpha cities aren't the only ones with global links. They're the ones with the strongest links. There are also beta and gamma categories that include cities with weaker links, and altogether, these three categories comprise 190 cities. So, maybe a short recap to make sense of all this. Out of thousands of cities in the world, only 190 have at least some degree of global connectivity, and only 49 are notable enough to be called a global hub. 8 are major hubs, and only 2 achieve the global city status. Visualized data on the world map shows the locations of these 190 cities. The colors represent alpha, beta, or gamma status, while the circle sizes indicate global network connectivity. Although the global economy's key cities still appear predominantly in the north, significant activity is now extending beyond the usual cities. The map shows relatively fewer and smaller global links in Latin America and especially Africa. Asia, however, seems to be catching up with the global north. Cities in China and Southeast Asia include sizable alphas. India and Gulf countries also have alpha cities, albeit smaller in connectivity, except for Dubai and Mumbai. And at the westernmost point of Asia is the alpha city of Istanbul, right outside the square that includes European cities. You are essentially looking at the map of the global economy, because these are its hubs and smaller nodes. And how the map has been changing since the early days of globalization is the abstract story of the global economy, with these circles getting larger or smaller, darker or lighter, or appearing and disappearing. I will now give a few more examples and show a few more maps so this makes even more sense and there are no misunderstandings, because the nuances of alpha, beta, and gamma categories can be confusing not only in terms of magnitude but also in content. For example, Porto, Portugal, and Dhaka, Bangladesh are listed back-to-back in the Gamma Plus category. They're shown on the map with similarly sized, same color circles, but they connect to the global economy in very different ways. Porto is a small city in the global north with an urban area of only 1.4 million people. It's a notable European urban destination nonetheless, attracting a skilled workforce while being a classy tourist destination. The city has also been exporting port wine since colonial times. The colonial flow we covered earlier involved the establishment of global shipping networks which helped distribute and popularize Portuguese products around the world, and today the city is benefiting from that economic history. Dhaka, Bangladesh, however, is a very different city. First of all, it's not in the core, it's in the periphery. It's a city in the global south, and it was once a part of British India. It's not a small city at all. In fact, it's the 5th largest city in the world with a population of 23 million, but with very limited tourist draw. We covered Dhaka earlier with the Rana Plaza collapse in 2013. The case involved low-cost textile manufacturing for global brands, which is a huge industry in Bangladesh. And that's how Dhaka primarily connects to the global supply chains. Yet this huge industry, or this megacity status, has little influence on Dhaka's global connectivity. Again, this index doesn't measure economic output, or population, or quality of life. There are other rankings for those. This index measures primarily global connectivity provided by advanced service firms such as banks, management consultancies, legal offices, and advertising agencies that operate in the city. These firms make the city a node in their international networks and, in so doing, tie it into the larger global economy. Lower value or labor-intensive industries don't directly translate into the kind of high-level business services that this index measures. These industries may still create demand for legal or financial services, for example, for export financing or contract negotiations, but their influence is indirect. There are 35 such megacities in the world, 21 in the developing world, 7 in China, and only 7 in the entire global north. Megacities in the developing world form a distinct tier within the global economy, often characterized by rapid urbanization and population growth, sometimes with inadequate planning and thus evolving infrastructure and uneven development. These megacities are chaotic ecosystems where informal economies thrive alongside formal industries, creating dynamic but unpredictable environments. These cities adapt to global economic shifts while grappling with internal pressures like rural-to-urban migration, overcrowding, pollution, and inequality. The majority of the 21 megacities in the developing world are on beta and gamma levels. 8 have made it to alpha tiers. These cities are quite representative of the emerging markets as defined by the IMF. As we covered earlier, the countries the IMF characterizes as developed correspond to a small portion of the world. On the other end of the spectrum are the least developed countries, or LDCs. Everything in between is the developing world, which corresponds to the majority of the world's territories and population. There's significant variation across the developing world in every key variable, including development prospects. Emerging markets are the top layer of the developing world. They're growing at a faster pace, and they have a higher potential to achieve fully developed status, similar to the 4 Asian tigers. And in the past quarter century, the emerging markets have been doing exactly that. As far back as the index goes to the year 2000, only one developing megacity, Sao Paulo, was included in the alpha category. At that time, Dubai was a beta city. It moved up 4 tiers since then. Beijing and Istanbul were beta plus cities, listed next to each other. Now Beijing is next to Dubai in the alpha plus tier, and Istanbul is an alpha city. Today, these cities have strong international reach, considerable regional influence, and are closely interconnected both with each other and with the leading command centers above them. However, they don't possess the ultimate decision-making power. While they serve as effective conduits between local markets and the global system, they don't dictate or set the global agenda as comprehensively as the top global cities do. There's also a qualitative difference between the developing and developed alpha cities, including those on the same alpha tier. Even though these cities share similar levels of global connectivity, their roles often differ in practice. The developed cities tend to have more mature financial sectors, a deeper penetration of advanced producer services, and stronger cultural exports built over decades. For example, Frankfurt is the financial capital of the Eurozone and home to the European Central Bank, as well as Germany's largest stock exchange. Amsterdam is another major European financial center with strong global connections, hosting large multinational firms and tech headquarters. Milan is Italy's economic powerhouse, a leader in finance, fashion, and design, and is home to Italy's stock exchange, Borsa Italiana. Madrid is Spain's financial and corporate center with strong Latin American economic links and a growing tech sector. Warsaw is Central and Eastern Europe's most globally integrated business hub with rapid foreign investment and regional headquarters for global firms. By contrast, the emerging alpha megacities are experiencing rapidly growing corporate headquarters, transportation networks, and media industries, which increasingly link their vast regional markets to global systems. Although these developing megacities match their developed counterparts in outward ties, they often still display a more regional rather than global command function. For example, Jakarta functions more as a regional gateway for Southeast Asia. Mumbai is India's financial center and it has Bollywood, so it wields vast regional influence, but it's still overshadowed globally by established Western hubs. Istanbul is located strategically and has one of the world's most globally connected airports. It's a major tourist destination, and in recent years, it consistently ranks among the top most visited cities in the world. However, the city's financial ecosystem remains more regionally focused and is sometimes heavily influenced by investment climates, especially given the political tensions in the region. To make a more solid sense of these comparisons, let's look at the case of Rome, a city with profound historical and cultural significance, yet has been underperforming in nearly every category that defines a world-class city, and thus ranks low in any global city rankings. The index ranks Rome as a beta plus city, but here we have another major ranking, the Global Power City Index by the Mori Foundation in Japan. And we have more or less the same cities at the top and in the second tier. But even when we look at function-specific rankings, Rome is nowhere to be found. It doesn't get mentioned in the latest report even once. What we see instead is the emergence of newly globalizing cities, Shanghai, Beijing, Dubai, Istanbul, Kuala Lumpur, and others. They are now outranking others not only in economy and R&D, but also in realms long dominated by the global north, such as cultural interaction, livability, and accessibility. The world has changed a lot in the past few decades. We have witnessed the emergence of China, a new superpower that has rapidly built new cities with top-notch infrastructure and connectivity. Although in the West, algorithms tend to rather show us construction projects that went wrong. In real life, we have long been going in the direction of a multipolar world with new and emerging global hubs, with an evolving urban culture, driven primarily by tech industries and innovation. The rise of alternative hubs brings with it the diversification of financial networks as well. Accordingly, capital flows are changing and investment priorities are shifting. Both new and established hubs are adapting to these changes, as are businesses, sometimes by relocating or by strengthening local ties. Cities with global-scale goals are trying to make a name for themselves, so they seriously engage in branding. For example, they compete with each other to host conventions and other international activity. It's still London and New York, the two well-established global cities that attract most of the money, top jobs, and modern services. They still lead in decision-making, but cities like Shanghai, Beijing, and others are making significant efforts to increase their shares. Notably, 14 of the current 49 alpha cities are located in countries that are associated with BRICS as members or partners or applicants, underscoring the shifting locus of global economic and urban influence. BRICS was initially conceived as a bloc of emerging markets: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and later South Africa. Then, the alliance came to increasingly attract additional nations seeking a similar path. The fact that nearly a third of alpha-tier cities now originate in these countries signals the accelerated development of major urban centers beyond the traditional Western strongholds. This growth, on the one hand, leads to integration into the global economy, as advised by the IMF and other international institutions, but on the other, leads to intensifying competition and geopolitical rivalry among established and rising powers. In conclusion, take a moment to consider the advantages of analyzing the global economy also from the city level rather than just the country level, and how doing so offers insights into the specific nodes where economic power, innovation, and global connectivity truly concentrate. City-level indicators such as financial market size, corporate headquarters count, infrastructure quality, and cultural influence often capture the reality of global flows more accurately than national statistics. Indeed, some cities have come to wield greater influence than entire nation-states, both within their own countries and in comparison to others. When investors, companies, and individuals make decisions, they often look to these city hubs and their specialized sectors, talent clusters, and global networks rather than the broader national context. Given the change that occurred in the first quarter of the 21st century, between 2000 and 2025, it's possible we can talk about a completely different world in another 25 years, in 2050.